Hello friends, welcome again to my shop today where I share great ideas. It's not quite as cold outside as it was yesterday. It's only minus 15 centigrade. Yesterday it was minus 24. Still need a coat and the shop's not real warm yet. Anyway, last video I put on, we made these, showed you how to make those globe Christmas decorations using a homemade mandrel, and mandrel works fantastic, or just another piece. You can stick them on the end and then you can spray paint them, do whatever you want, and you don't get your hands, you don't have to hold them in that, and then you just set it on something and it dries out. Anyway, what we need on there is the finials. And I mentioned last day that I'm going to show you how to make those finials without the equipment that professionals use, so you can do a professional job with whatever woodchuck that you have. So what I'd been doing is making them on the metal lathe with the 3-jaw chuck, and I could hold it that way, and that was okay, but it wasn't that successful. And I was thinking, if I just had a collet, it would work, but I couldn't think of it. And then one day it dawned on me when I looked at this piece of pipe here, and I thought, well, I'll just cut some slots in there, and then when the jaws grip it, it'll be like a collet, and then I can take dowel stock that I make. I can have a piece 4 foot long if I want, because it goes right through the headstock, and then you just keep bringing it out. And I thought that was the ultimate way to do it. Here's one here, another one just made out of plastic, piece of pipe that I had. And this is 1 inch, and I find the 1 inch works ideal for the finials, 1 inch diameter. So I'm going to show you how to make a collet for a regular chuck for the lathe, and it'll hold it just as good as the expensive chucks and those pin jaws, which I don't have. But the reason I came up with this, I was thinking, yeah, I could do it on the metal lathe, okay, and I'm okay, but I have some friends that don't have that, in fact, and just have regular chucks, and hard to tell them, well, spend another few $100s, get an expensive chuck, and the jaws, yeah, and then you can do it. So I was thinking, what can I do? And I came up with an idea that it works so great, I'm doing mine all that way again, right on the wood lathe. It's a right height, and I've got more clearance, and I can operate my tools so much better. And it just looks like this. Here it is right here. Okay. And it fits right inside one of these little chucks, so it looks like that. And you just rough turn a dowel and leave a little taper here and lay it down so it just fits in there real nice. It goes up against the little taper here, and it's actually solid. Then when you put it into the chuck, if you have that, you have to make this quite accurate, just like you were going to do at the bottom of a bowl, and cinch that down, and it holds it super strong. And you can see what I've done there. I've cut 4 slots there, so it's a collet too. So it's a collet attachment for the regular wood chuck there. So anyway, I'm going to be showing you step by step how to make that, because it's a fantastic addition to that you need. So you start out with a piece of wood, hardwood, clear hardwood. The first one I made, I had it flat grain ways, so when I cinched it down, one of the little ears broke off. I've got to go ahead and make one. So what you have to do is you have to have end grain. And you need a piece about 2 inches in diameter that would fit your chuck. And I just used a cap from a thing and drew around. I'll cut that out there. And I'll just mention here while I'm thinking about it. This piece here is 2 inches that way. If you have a chuck like this with a longer jaw here, then you make it longer. You have to kind of look at the chuck that you're going to use there. I'm using this one here, which is an old Nova G3, I believe, that somebody gave me. They didn't want it anymore, and I made it to fit this here, so it works real good. And the reason why you have to use end grain this way, it has to go this way, is that collet part there. When it the first one, the dovetail thing, broke one of those ears off. Where with the end grain going all the way, there's no way it can break that off. So what I'm going to do here is cut this out on the bandsaw. I'm going to drill a hole in the center. I believe there are 5/16 that fits one of these little gadgets there. Screws that on there. And I'm going to use this little chuck here because it came with it and it matches there. So I'll get that all drilled and set up on the lathe, and then we'll talk about it a little bit further. Okay, I've mounted it on the lathe here. This is my homemade lathe, and I can use it today for doing this job. And so what I've taken my chuck here and measured the distance in here, put a little line on there so I know where the dovetail is going to go. You're doing exactly the same thing as you would for a bowl, dovetail on a bowl, but you have to look at your chuck and see what the shape is. Now this one has a little lip right at the front, and then it goes flat. So we're going to want it to sit on the flat part, and then this little raised part here, we'll have to notch it in a little bit so that fits in there. And there's no way it can pull out or wiggle at all there. So, I used the inside-outside caliper here to find out what the inside diameter was approximately, and then it's just a matter of fitting it. So I'm just going to use, I think, a parting tool here because it's a small area there, and you can use whatever tools of your choice. But anyway, I'll go ahead here and work on this a little bit. Okay, and then it's just a matter of taking your chuck and seeing how close it is until you get it just perfect there. You always want to start with a little bit high and then work it down, but if you're used to doing the dovetails, you can have that done in a matter of seconds. This is basically the first thing that I did with this chuck because I haven't had it too long. You get mixed up on which way to turn this silly thing. And then once you get it into position, and turn it down and lock it up. And then you can see, you'll see little points when it's too big. You'll see the little points where the four jaws are touching the wood there. We want it to touch all the way around, not just in 4 points. So I'm just going to go ahead here. No need to watch this, and just go back and forth here till I get that just how I want it there. Okay, I think I've got the perfect dovetail for that particular chuck. I've got the little, it's basically flat here with that little lathed in there for that little hooked area there. You just have to look at your chuck to get it in there and spend some time getting it so it's just perfect. I probably went back and forth 4 or 5 times before I was happy with it, just shaving a little bit off, testing it and trying it. So the next step here will be to now mount it in the chuck and bore the hole through here. And I'm going to use a 1-inch bit there. On my homemade lathe, my tailstock isn't perfect, and so I'm going to move over to my metal lathe, mount the chuck in the metal lathe, and drill it through with that. But if you have a bought lathe, it'll be accurate, and you'll just drill your hole with a Forester bit to the size that you want there. Okay, I've got this set up here, and whether you do it on the wood lathe or however you do it, and it's important though to do it with the chuck turning on the. I wouldn't do it on the drill press because you could get a little bit crooked here. So you want to know the full depth of your thing, and this one is 2 inches. And then I'm starting right here. I don't want to drill right through to the other side because there's probably run into some metal there, and you don't want to do that with your thing there. So, and then I've got it set in your wood shop. Your regular wood lathe usually has inches or some sort of measurement there as well. So I'll just go ahead and start this up and start boring it. I set it on 3, so I'll have to go on 1, so I'll have to go up towards 3. Okay. There must have been a little air gap because it felt like it went through, but it might have just pushed the last little bit through there. Okay, so now we can take this back to the wood lathe and shape the end here a little bit. And we're just about and then one more step and we're ready to use it. Okay, all I'm going to do now is just taper this down here a little bit. It's a sharp edge here. I want to put a slight taper on here. You don't want to do it too much because we're going to cut in this way. We want a reasonable amount of wood holding the end, this end part here. And that's all there is to it, okay? You can judge how much you feel you want to take off. I'm leaving this one a lot thicker than the first one that I made there. So anyway, off to the last step. Before I take this out, I thought I better explain a couple other things. One is I turned it on, made a line all the way around, and because we're going to cut up to that line, and that's going to be our collet. I've also taken a felt pen and put a mark here and a mark here. So when I take this chuck out of here, I put it back exactly in the same place. I don't think it would make any difference because they're pretty accurate. And then I took a pencil mark and marked each slot here, because that's where we're going to make our cut for our super collet. Okay, so that's how we'll go to the bandsaw now. What's interesting here is when you're boring it, because you're doing end grain, it just pushed that last little piece out, and so it didn't, you don't have to worry about hitting the chuck. It'll just leave that in there and then it'll start to spin. You can't cut any lower. Anyway, back to the bandsaw. Okay, take your, use those little lines that we made there and put them across the end, okay? Now, we're going to use one of these wood clamps to clamp that. The first one I did one when I put the grain the wrong way. I just did it freehand and it was kind of crooked. So we're going to use this and then line it up. So your line here is vertical, and you can check that with the bandsaw blade. So I'm just going to move around here, take a look at it. And I think I just needed a little adjustment there. I might have adjusted it the wrong way because I looked at it one way. Yeah. Okay. Adjusted it the wrong way when I turned around the other side. Okay. There we go. Okay. My thing here is a little wonky. Okay. Okay, one final check. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so and then we'll turn it 180 degrees. And I'll check that once again here. Ooh, way off, way off. Okay. Look good on the top, but the bottom it doesn't look good. One more check. And holy doodle, how did I get so good? And there we go. We've got our collet adapted to a regular wood turning chuck. On this particular one here, I didn't make these cuts as far as the first one, and I left this bulkier too. So it's just a matter of experimenting. Start big, change it after, because you can always cut these deeper, and you can always bring this down a little bit. But we don't want this part here to split apart, and I'll show you why in a minute. Okay, the only disadvantage of this system is that you have to take your piece of wood you're going to use for your finial and lathe it down. Now, I took this piece about 8 inches long, and then you have to lay this down here till it fits the that little adapter that we made. Now, to make this a little quicker, I thought I just made up a little slip thing here so you can get the right diameter. It's fairly important to get it so it fits that hole on there quite a bit. And we know it's 2 inches, so we don't want to go beyond this, and then we'll taper it up just slightly there. So I'll go ahead and see if I can get this to work. I've never tried this little unit before, but just making something simple. Okay, so that's basically what we'll do there, but that's not necessarily fit well. Okay, it fits in there, not too bad. I need to come down just a little bit more there. So we'll just mark that and put it back in there and clean that up. That should be good. Okay, now we can see that pretty well come to the end there, and I pushed it in there solid, and we're basically ready to turn the rest of it down here. Now we can, while we're doing it, we can reduce the diameter here if we need to. Okay, I've mounted a dowel in the adapter here. It seems to be holding quite well. Just from a little bit that I've done, I think what I'll do is I'll cut these just a little far. I've made them a little short, but I'm going to cut those a little farther and then cut them a little wider, and then it can compress it down on there a little tighter. But so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make the top for my Christmas ornament here, and then the rest of this will be the finial here, and then I'll do the finial on the bottom there. So it's just a matter of going to it. Okay, as you can see, that turns out fairly well there. You'll see it more when I do the other part. So I'm just going to finish this up for the top here. It needs a little more shaping here. I'm just going to show you a couple little things that I do here. One is when I sand to get nice curves, I use a little piece of pipe or dowel and just work it on there. If it's a bigger curve, you just slant it more. And now the next thing is we're ready to get this cut off. And you know that you've had 3/8, so what I'm taking is a 3/8 drill for a thing there. And okay, maybe in a hair too much. And then I'm going to take a thin parting tool to take that off. There we go. And we have our little top for the globe. Now what you should do, which I didn't do because this doesn't line up, you can drill your little hole right on the lathe for the wire that goes in there. And there's the little top part I made there. After I was done, remember we drilled this one size under, then I ran 3/8 through it, and that cleaned up the edges and made it there. And then that just pops on there. Okay, so here I'm going to make a nice thin finial on here. So I'm just going to work on it and show you it more when it's more completed. Okay, I've just about finished it here prior to sanding and then cutting it off. You can, with this, if we took a little bit more off here, it'd be a little easier to get in here, but I wanted to leave that thick enough so it doesn't split at all at any time. So I've done almost all my shaping with the skew after demonstration by Cade Bolger. I've been using it more and more, and it's the way to go. You get a smooth finish and you can take small amounts off. So I'll just take a few cuts here. It's a little thicker here than I want. I think this is just a little too big here, so we'll take it off there a little bit too. But I just wanted to show you how you could lathe right out to the end, and especially using a skew. It works really well. So I've made this part to match the one at the top here. Use a caliper to check the diameter you want. And so I'll just do the same as I did with the wrench, here. And but I'll sand it up first. I'll get it all sanded and then do that. Well, there's my finial all sanded and ready to take out. Now I could cut this off right here while it's on the lathe, but what I think I'll do is to leave this on, and then you have something to hold it as you put your finish on and that, and then once that's on, then you just take it off. So now it's just a matter of loosening this up I don't really care for these chucks. They're always hard to get in there. Okay. Okay, there, we can see it fairly well. And then it's just a matter of pushing it out, or it's stuck in there pretty good. After so just tap it a few times there, and there it comes out. So I'd like to cut this off, but yeah, I might cut it off, and then you can see it stuck in there right away. Okay, so I'll go cut it off and then put it together. Well, it's time to hear the conclusion of the finials and more finials. Anyway, yeah. I've found this little adapter here to be, as you can see, tremendously successful. I just love that thing. It allows me to do stuff that I couldn't do before. And so the following is a bunch of a series of pictures, probably a half a dozen or more, of making this particular finial with that adapter there. And a couple things I discovered. One, I had a piece of doweling that I had made quite a while ago that was supposed to be 1 inch, and it didn't quite. And the piece that I demonstrated with the end, I made this whole one out of here, and it's almost 6 inches long. I wanted to make a fairly long one, and so I had this other piece of doweling, and it wasn't quite tight enough when it went in here. If you remember, if you make one here, it's good to have a slight taper there, and then you push it in, it actually is nice and snug here, even though it may not be as snug in the back part of it there. So all I did was put a piece of tape around there, and I never know that it wasn't lathed for that. So there's some things that you can do. You can fudge a little bit here or there, and it still works. But this is a fantastic collet arrangement. I also cut these a little deeper than I did with the when I first started the video. The reason I did that, the reason I didn't want to cut too far, is that first one I made, it was laid down here quite a bit. So there was very little wood hoop, and it went and fell on the floor once with the dowel on it there, and it actually broke. So it'd be good if you had oak or something like that, or fairly good hardwood. I'd make them out of a hardwood. I've even thought of making it out of a piece of plastic, plastic stock. So this particular globe here, I had made that when I first started with this Christmas tree thing, and it was just sitting around. It wasn't finished. Anyway, when I made this, I wanted to make this fairly small there, and of course it wouldn't match the one that was on here. So what I did was I just spun it onto the arbor, which I've demonstrated in the first video, and didn't put the nut on at all. And then I just shaped it, took it off, turned it around, did it there. So that might be something you do if you use that arbor, is to do your finishing on your ends without the nut on there. Because when you screw it on, and you screw it up to the other side, and if you have a lock washer on there especially, I left the lock washer off in this case because I was just losing a little bit of wood. It's not going to spin on the shaft. So to me, this arbor for making these ornament type things is better than anything you can buy. I wouldn't go to something else at all now that I've used that a little bit. So anyway, thanks for watching, and subscribe. I've got a couple new adaptations that I've made that will blow your mind as well. You can turn a regular chuck into a bigger chuck without any extra money there. It's a very simple adaptation, and some other things there. I've got 2 more videos at least in the works here to film yet. So anyway, yeah, these pictures, probably a half a dozen or so, will show you how well that adapter works.